I guess I will get started and introduce the webinar. I'm Deirdre Spencer. I'm the librarian for History of Art. I'm the secretary of SACUA, and I'm also the chair, founder and chair of the Senate Assembly Committee for Anti-Racism. And we are so happy to have this wonderful panel of faculty. The whole purpose of our Committee for Anti-Racism was to address issues that we know happen on our campus and affect the success, the working relationships, just the ability to function on this campus. There are sometimes people who don't have a place to go. They don't know who they should talk to. So not only have we created this committee, but we also have at our website a reporting mechanism if you feel like you would like to make a report. I'm going to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Ketra Armstrong, and she is in the Department of Kinesiology, and she is going to lead us through this wonderful conversation. Take it away.
Very good. Thank you so much, Deirdre. And thanks to all of you out there in Zoom land for deciding to spend a portion of your day with us. So welcome to this, what we hope will be a very enlightening conversation about anti-racism and how it impacts the success of Black faculty and faculty of color. And to have this enlightened conversation, I am so delighted and honored to have with us our esteemed panelists of faculty from the University of Michigan. I'm going to give you a brief introduction. If you want to know more, check out their website. They're doing far too much for me to talk about. If I shared their accolades, we'd be here all day and the next day and then some. But I want to begin with Dr. Naomi Andre. And if you want to just wave your hand, Dr. Andre, professor of African American and African Studies and Women's Studies here at the University of Michigan. We also have Dr. Mark Allison, Dr. Mark, professor of computer science at the University of Michigan, Flint. Also joining us is Dr. Christian Davenport, professor of political science here at the University of Michigan. And last but certainly, well, I think we have two more. We also have Professor Benny. I think she's with us. So Dr. Laura Benny is professor of law here at the University of Michigan. And then last but not least, Dr. Stephen Ward, who is a professor of Afro-American and African Studies and the Residential College. So I have some questions for our panelists, and we're going to have a conversation. So for those of you in the listening audience, we want you to settle in, get comfortable. As we say in the South, sit a spell, take your shoes off, whatever you need to do to feel a part of this conversation, we want you to do it. And I also want to encourage your engagement and your participation by putting your questions or your comments in the Q&A, and to the extent possible, I'll try to work them into our conversation. So those are the ground rules, and without further ado, let's get started. Now, so our focus is on anti-racism and how it impacts the experiences of faculty of color, but notably Black faculty in particular. And I want to begin our conversation with some level setting. Let's just name racism, what it is, what it looks like, and how it presents and manifests. So I want to open it up to the panelists. I'll start with Dr. Andre. Just help us to understand, what does racism look like? How is it presenting? How is it manifesting in a way that challenges and impacts Black faculty and faculty of color? Let's name it.
Sure. So I have, perhaps this can be sort of an opening case study or just a few things to say. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and especially the invitation from Professor Spencer and SACUA for us to have this group of people here. So I'm going to speak candidly for a few minutes and acknowledge elements about who I am and what this looks like around some expected hurdles and unexpected hurdles. Just a little bit about me. I was hired here. I'm a little unusual in that, although I have a feeling all of us have sort of special backgrounds, because you don't see a lot of Black faculty, particularly at the senior level. I was hired ABD before I finished my dissertation, and I was able to negotiate the first semester off to finish and then start teaching. And this was in the winter of 1996. I was hired in 1995. I've been here 27 years. And that was in the musicology program in the School of Music. After not being supported there for tenure, my appointment moved 100% to LS&A, and I was the first 100% fully budgeted person in women's studies, as it was called then. Now I am affiliated with Women's and Gender Study, and I am 50-50 in DAS and the Department of African American Studies and in the residential college. And and this has been a really good, happy fit. I love being in DAS and the RC. So I want to say that an expected hurdle I had was being a Black woman in musicology. It's a discipline that until very recently, and especially when I was going through in the 90s, it was primarily about the Western European canon. So I knew just my very presence was going to be challenging. In graduate school, it was a big deal to be a white American man in the department. There were German men speaking German in the halls. And there were no women on the faculty, though there had been at various points. When I got there, there was one woman who was retiring and then she left, and now others have come in there. Expected hurdles. So I knew being a Black woman in musicology was going to be tough. I was expecting that in a predominantly white institution where I did graduate school and where I am now, that it was going to be extra difficult to get inside. And because with our liberal white colleagues, we need them to feel comfortable with who we are. Invite us out for coffee, invite us to be on panels, to participate in edited research volumes, cite me, invite me into their homes so they can think of me as a scholar and to be granted promotion and leadership. So I knew those would be expected hurdles that I was facing. Let me say, just as wrapping up, I've got two examples of unexpected hurdles. One was as a musicologist, and so I realized that my affiliations all out of the School of Music and Musicology. I was trained at Harvard as a musicologist working on a Western music topic, the Secondo Ottocento, which is the second half of the 19th century. I wrote a Giuseppe Verdi dissertation. So I was expecting, okay, you know, I'm doing something in the mainstream. However, that wasn't the case, because within the mainstream, I was asking questions about gender and culture. And so if I'm convinced that being a Black woman asking these questions, pushing the discipline, was an extra complicated thing for folks. Another unexpected hurdle and related, and I just want to make a really quick reference that yesterday, the Michigan Daily published an article that just begins to scratch the surface of the hostile environment in the School of Music, Theater, and Dance musicology program. The article documents over 30 years of unprofessional conduct by two musicology professors. And the unexpected element is that only now, after the beginning with this one article to expose the situation, and it had been causing harm to students and faculty, only is this now, this is the unexpected part, that it's only real now, not imagined. There are many, many cases where students, both Black, the few Black students, Black faculty, myself included, had tried to address this within the world of the university, and it just couldn't go forward. The last unexpected hurdle is actually, I'm going to use two case studies very quickly to explain it. And I know I'm going on for a while, but again, I'm putting this out there and for conversations. Is that I've been here at Michigan for 27 years. I'm a full professor, and I've had a lot of accolades. I am on the board for the most prestigious musicology professional society, the American Musicological Society. My recent book, well, from 2018, so I guess not too recent by academic terms, it won 2 major awards from the American Musicological Society and the Society for American Music. My work is also being cited in opera companies, where I'm working with every major opera company in the United States, as well as with a lot of regional companies. So I've gotten some success. And so I feel I can say things where I have not, the internalized inferiority I have felt is now, I'm beginning to feel a little stronger. When we see biases, and the biases, I'm talking about two institutions here on the Ann Arbor campus, one with the Michigan Society of Fellows and one with the Institute for the Humanities. The Michigan Society of Fellows chooses the junior fellows, and I was horrified when I was first there and heard how the candidates were being talked about. I don't want to focus on that because the good news is that is being corrected. Speaking up, being part of this senior group, I was taken seriously. And I nominated new people to get more people around the table. So that is a case where people's unconscious bias, by speaking up as somebody who's achieved something, proven myself to myself and to others, I was able to do something. The second point with the Institute for the Humanities, I've applied several times, as have many people in the humanities at Michigan, and I was turned down. I was told this is the norm. I even spoke with one of the directors, who was a fellow women's studies colleague, Sid Smith, a couple of years ago when I was turned down. This year I applied, and I have an upcoming sabbatical in the winter term, and I thought, let's try to make it a full year. And I, for the fifth time in 27 years, I was turned down from the Institute for the Humanities. And it's like, well, obviously I don't know how to write proposals, do I? I received the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton and the Institute for Advanced Studies at Harvard through the Radcliffe Institute, the same proposal. Something isn't right. And now I'm going to use my experience as saying, hey, we need to do something about it. I've got the smoking gun. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And I appreciate you, sharing the insight and the nature of the experiences. And we can hear a number of the intersectional ways and the myriad of ways in which race, seemingly racism, has been present in your experience to have a dramatic impact. But I have to tell you, I'm also glad to see the recovery, like you're coming out, you're powerful, and that's the thing. We know that many of the struggles, they make us stronger. They teach us something. And so we feel that, Dr. Andre, we feel that. So thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you, Dr. Ward, talk about your experiences. How has racism presented and manifested itself in a way that has adversely impacted the experiences and the success for Black faculty and other faculty of color?
Okay, thank you, Ketra and Deidre and other organizers. So let me first speak to the way that you opened up, Ketra, saying that let's name racism. And in a simple, but I hope generative way, let's remind ourselves or state firmly that naming racism, another way to name it is to restate it as white supremacy, and to recognize that it presents itself in a myriad of ways, as you suggested. That can include the individual slights or transgressions or barriers that we may face. And it also includes things that we don't see or don't know. And also, in addition to that, it also includes the way in which our spaces and our practices in the institution are shaped and cared for. Sometimes those are seen or not seen by only when we're in certain spaces. So all that to say that there's a range of ways in which racism is expressed. So to have useful conversations and conversations that move towards challenging towards anti-racist ideas and practices, we have to continually remind ourselves of the variety of ways in which racism manifests itself. And the next point I'll make is that the struggles against racism in any institution, in the case in our institution, themselves create new opportunities, new challenges, and new terrain in which that struggle will continue. And my experience has been particularly through the Department of Afro-American African Studies, DAS, which was founded in 1970 as CAS, the Center for Afro-American African Studies. And it was part of the broader movement to create Black studies in institutions of higher learning in the country in that period, late 60s, early 70s. So I'll stop here after introducing that and I'd like to pick back up on that, return to that. But to say that that was expressly an anti-racist movement. In fact, the movement for Black studies grew out of the Black Power movement, which itself broader social movement that came out of, and in some ways, was rejecting or moving beyond the civil rights movement. So what I'm saying is we have a unit on campus, the Department of Afro-American and African Studies, which itself is expressly, inherently an anti-racist project. That's where it came from. Now, that leaves open a lot of questions of what it is now, to what extent it is carrying forth now, which I'm having more conversation about today and beyond. But just remind ourselves that we do have an entity on campus which was founded expressly as an anti-racist project.
Yes, thank you so much. And I agree with you. There's so many ways that race presents itself, you know, be it expressed and implied and covert and overt and at the micro, macro system level. And I think our challenge is to call it out, you know, so that we can address these things boldly. And as you mentioned, this campus has evidence of some anti-racist projects. And I know that there's more that are in the works. So thank you so much for that, Stephen. I want to go to you, Dr. Davenport. Share with us, you know, your perspectives of how race and racism presents itself and how it manifests in the academy in a way that impacts the success of Black faculty and other faculty of color.
Okay, so the question is morphing, but that's perfectly cool. I'll roll with the morph. So as a political scientist, I want to be clear that it's a very basic and coarse discipline. So in many respects, the conception of race and racism that we would have are very straightforward. So racism would just be a discriminatory policy or behavior that is directed against a particular race or ethnic group by another against some baseline that negatively impacts the target. So this is like first face of power type of conversation. We're basic, we're thugs. You have a club, you beat somebody. So I, in the academy, I'm not subject to first faces of power. I'm more second and third face of power, agenda control or internalization of norms. So the thing that I study, power, is a distinct manifestation of the phenomena that I would experience. And so, so for example, in graduate school, I'm asked by this guy, Richard Hofferbert, which city or African country am I going to study? Because he just imagined that's what Black people did. And I went to grad school to study social movements, but I was trained from Cynthia Enloe and Zenobia Soker in the Russian Revolution and the Nicaraguan and the Cuban struggles. So I already came with a distinct orientation. I did have an interest in the Panthers, but I did realize very clearly this was not a pathway that was going to work. And then my response to Hofferbert was, forget you, I'm going to study the globe. So I'm going to be a globalist. So this enabled me to kind of like navigate. So this is jumping around questions a little bit about like how have you navigated stuff, but it's a response to the faces of power discussion. I was able to kind of see exactly kind of like what was going along, what was going to be an interesting pathway. And so I pursued this global orientation, but the global orientation is about state violence, and state violence directed against Black folk was my main case. I just didn't talk about that case. I talked about the globe, but the first thing I always talked about was persecution and discrimination and violence directed against Black folk. So that allowed me to situate the thing that I really wanted to do into the discipline. So take advantage of the fact political science is about power. That's it. Well, now it's about power from above. I had to do sociology to get power from below, separate points. So I was doing both. So that allowed me to kind of skate. So I'm working with Wallerstein and Petrus and Arrighi and world systems theory and so forth to get sociology. I had the social movements orientation, and then I'm doing the state, and then was able to kind of fashion something. But so that helped me navigate around these. There was no, we're not going to have any Negroes doing this. There's no policy of that. We want to have a quantitatively oriented program, however. Okay, so I'm from New York City. We don't have the best school systems at that time. And so, okay, I didn't come in with the best stats background. So I had some other stuff to do. So it wasn't explicit, we don't want any Negroes, but basically it did have that deleterious effect. So I think there's a bunch of that forces one to kind of navigate around different things. So I think I answered part of your question, but I'll stop.
Yeah, you did. Absolutely. You did. And I appreciate that. And I'm hearing a thread that I'll circle back to in just a second. But before I do so, Dr. Allison, share with us your perspective of how race and racism presents or is manifested and how that challenges Black faculty and faculty of color.
All right, great. Thank you for inviting me on the panel. So let me give another perspective. So I worked in industry before coming to the academy. I had some help. I had actually had a Black computer scientist on my dissertation, right? And he kind of helped me. I have been in an NSF program for Black engineers that provides mentorship and gives a perspective beyond the University of Michigan. So I could tell you that things in the academy are, I would say, worse than it is in industry, because almost necessarily this space, you come to the realization really early that this space was not designed for Black faculty, right? And I think everyone here can agree that there's this overhead, right? There's this overhead in almost every decision process. Every time you open your mouth, how am I appearing? How will this, and this is wrong, right? But good enough. I've gotten tenure, so I'm able to reduce this latency and be able to speak a little clearer. What I can say is what is being experienced is probably not all the result of racists, right? They aren't rampant racists running all over the campuses. There is not. However, going back to the point that these spaces were not designed for us, it's baked in. It's systemic and systematic. It's all over. And it doesn't need racists to perpetuate, right, this disparity. It doesn't need it. It can run on its own, and you have to realize that. And the only way to alleviate this condition is for it to be disruptive, right? Disrupted. And I would call, and honestly, junior faculty, right, and those in more vulnerable positions, I would caution you not to go against the system. But then again, those who can, those who have tenure, please do everything that you can to help those who can't, right? And that's pretty much my message here. And secondly, right, with this system, this is how good this system is. I want you to think about it. So we want it to be green or climate green friendly, and we got a date,
Neutrality.
metric. We have every single step on here, everything, right? These benchmarks, just like how you would do your research, right? And put together a proposal. You have benchmark, assessment. However, when it comes to work in inclusion, work in anti-racism, it's a cloud. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna do this. And did it work? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. And this goes on. And there's no, if you ask for numbers, you get the smoke and mirrors. So I think we should, at the very least, try to get measurements. Because without measurements, we're not going to be able to improve, right? We can't do these we can't do these studies that, oh, everybody's going to say everything is all right, but it's not. All right, I don't want to go into war stories, but it's not. All right, I'll leave it there.
Yeah. No, thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, I think there's a book title. I won't do it justice. Racism Without Racist. I think, or something of that nature, because it's and you know, we know that if, like you mentioned, Dr. Allison, if all the racist people in the world were no longer in the academy, racism would persist because it's embedded in the structure. It's in the institutional fiber. It's in the ways of doing and the ways of being. And until we disrupt that, we won't disrupt racism. Okay, I have an aside. Like, I think after this webinar, we need to get together. I hear an edited book, and this is what the title is. Thanks, Dr. Allison, is Racism Disrupted. Right? Crumbling the halls of the academy. So I think there's something there. So stay tuned. So those of you in the listening audience, stay tuned. We got some products that might be coming your way. Now, before we move on to the next question, Dr. Binney, I'd like for you to share with us your perspective of what racism is, how it presents, how it manifests, and how it challenges Black faculty and faculty of color.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll try to stay straight. Apparently when I turn away, you can't hear me, so try to sit still. Racism is multifaceted. It's not one, I don't think you can characterize it in one way. It can be blatant, and it can be very subtle, and it can be institutional, it can be systemic, it can be conscious, and it can be unconscious. So I wouldn't say that I have a single definition for racism. At the same time, I would say that for us, our experience is that if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, acts like a duck, it's probably a duck. And so instinctively, when an individual experiences it, whether subtle or not subtle, I think instinctively we develop a knack to discern that, okay, I reasonably believe that I'm experiencing racism now. The problem with that is that because it is multidimensional, and we're aware that it's multidimensional, it's also hard to convince other people who don't experience it in that in those multiple ways that this is what you're experiencing. And so as a faculty member, and I would say even students, not just faculty, but also students, you can find yourself alone if you express that you're experiencing elements of racism. You can find yourself alone in the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, you can find yourself actually also penalized and possibly even retaliated against for expressing your experience. From the perspective of faculty members, so faculty have three primary obligations: service, teaching, and scholarship research, scholarship/research. So in the classroom, racism can manifest, well, I should say that I'm a law professor and my area of law is economics and law. So it's kind of similar to Christian Davenport's area in that, we talk about power, we talk about wealth, and it's quite realistic in the sense that rules and institutions are driven by efficiency and profit maximization motive, and there's not much leeway for other considerations in in the dominant framework. Of course, there are challenges to the dominant framework, but what that means is that if you know, in teaching or in your scholarship, you bring in other considerations, you will quickly find yourself in my area outside of the mainstream. And so if you start to talk about how race interplays with the political power and wealth, you can quickly become problematic. I would qualify that, however, and say that you're more problematic if you're a member of a group, a marginalized group. I think it's easier for members of non-marginal groups to speak about how race comes in. In fact, people can make careers on it. But if you, as a marginal scholar, start to integrate race and geography, you know, Africa and these other considerations and colonialism into the framework, you become more problematic, I think, as a scholar and as a colleague. So that's one element of how race can come into play. Teaching, you know, I mean, there are many times when I am the only Black person in the classroom, believe it or not, including students. And it does set up a particular dynamic. Not only am I I also teach corporate finance law students. For whatever reason, for many years, about 80% of the students were male. So there's gender and race. And when you find yourself the only female and the only Black person, or one of the few females and the only Black person in the classroom, it does set up a particular dynamic, because many of the students, they have never, sorry, my daughter, is that making a lot of noise in the background? My daughter is blending something in the kitchen.
It's very faint, so you're okay.
Okay. She likes to get busy after school with blending up things, but
Share.
you know, many of the students, they've never had a professor like you. And I think because of the the endemic nature of society, racism in society, and the race and class hierarchy, you get a mixture of responses. Some students are very excited to have a professor like no other they've ever had, and they're really open to learning and seeing what they can learn from you. But you also, you know, frankly, get hostility in the classroom, and you can get hostility and presumption of incompetence. And so if you do something that all faculty routinely do, you can be reprimanded for doing that thing that all faculty engage in. For example, not discussing every single page that you assigned, right? That's normally not a problem. That actually is to be expected. But if you do it, you can be called to a different standard for doing that. Or even for mentioning things that are not in the readings, you can be called to account for that as well. And then, you know, service, well, you know, not all service is equal. And so there are service opportunities within a department or a unit or a school. There are service opportunities that actually enhance an individual's academic career and professional career. And there are other service opportunities that do not have that capacity. And you can be relegated. I mean, I think one way that racism or gender bias can play out is that you're relegated to less influential committees. And so I think I've talked too long, but I'm happy to answer additional. I'm not.
Beg pardon?
Oh, I saw Deidre. She said
Oh,
I'm
no.
not.
I was like, you're not talking too long. I'm just happy that, of course, she's moderating. Ketch was moderating. I'm sorry. I'm just excited.
Okay, I'll stop because I think Q&A is really important.
Yeah, no, that's good. I appreciate I appreciate all of your responses. And let me just say before I forget it, I like what Dr. Davenport refers to as the two-finger intervention. If you want to chime in, if there's something that one of the panelists say says that you want to add on to, we're having a conversation. Pretend we're sitting around the kitchen table, brothers and sisters, and we're having a conversation. So before I get to Dr. Davenport's add-on, I want to remind those of you in the audience to please put your questions in the chat. We want to engage you in this conversation. We want to hear what you're thinking. So I don't see any yet. So I just want to encourage you to please put your questions and your
Q&A.
in the Q&A. Sorry, please put it in the Q&A, and because we want to engage you and involve you in this conversation. Dr. Davenport, you wanted to add on before I move to the next question?
We were around the table, you wouldn't be calling me Dr. Davenport, but I
just show your respect, brother. Just giving you
whatever. No, it's not. That's all right. So just quickly, so that my two finger interventions, they're very quick, right? So one was just kind of listening to this conversation. It would be nice if anybody could call an anonymous line and get like, just like Dave Chappelle, ask a black dude, ask a race expert, is this racism? And like literally have someone like walk them through what they saw. Cause it's like, we can't navigate this other stuff, but you just call somebody, send a message to somebody anonymously and you get a response. This is this, and this falls into this category. And for me, I went with the kind of like, legal conception one because that's what political scientists would do in many respects in terms of providing a definition, but also like in thinking of how my experience with racism has manifested itself. I find that I am most caught by trying to differentiate what I'm experiencing as either racism or some kind of class bias. So my thing is, I'm used to now being hired with a bunch of other Black people from elite Ivy League schools. That's just it. To have an individual that is from a public institution, that got their degree from a public institution, that is at Michigan, this is still a rarity. Most Black folk that I see are from Ivy League schools. And then you go back and that just had that trajectory. They went to Andover and then they went to whatever. And so it's like, very, very different life experiences. And so I've been finding that parsing to be consistently difficult to do. And we want to jump on and be like, oh no, this is just some race. Okay, no, what about this other thing? I would like to be around I'm from New York. If I don't see someone who's cross-dressing in leather that is an anarchist, I feel like I'm not in a normal environment. And so we can talk about like differences and diversity and so forth, but my conception of diversity is much different than the silos that we're occasionally given. So
yes, very, very good. And Dr. Naomi.
Oh, I love that, Dr. Naomi.
See, I'm getting better. I'm getting the first name. Still got the doctor, but I'm getting there, Kristen. I'm getting there.
Kristen, you bring up such a great point about this sort of class difference with different institutions. I am somebody who came from a family without much money, single parent household, first generation in college, and yet I am a recipient of incredible scholarships. So I went to a Quaker prep school, I went to Barnard, I went to Harvard. And so there's this sort of weirdness there. I almost think what you're talking about in the academy of this sort of hidden educational something is almost like how we as Black folks have it's a complicated thing to talk about colorism. And how so many people in higher education, those of us who've made it, there's a real bias towards the lighter you are, sort of the higher you go. So I just wanted to, I have no answers for this, but I just wanted to say you are absolutely right that these are sort of weirdnesses hanging out there.
Well, listen, thank you so much. What I heard, particularly in the thread, in the first round of responses, you talked about the different ways, the myriad of ways in which race manifests itself to impact faculty of color. I heard scholarship, being challenged as to what you research, how you research it, why you research it, and the validity of you as a researcher, because you're in a racialized, genderized, classist body. And so I appreciate you talking about the way, because listen, particularly at the University of Michigan, the research enterprise that it is, scholarship is a linchpin of success for faculty. And I just wanted our audience to understand the ways in which race and racism has impacted scholarship in a way that has really had an impact on our faculty of color. And Dr. Andre, you mentioned at the outset, it impacts tenure, it impacts productivity, it impacts, what is valued when you produce it and how it's valued or devalued when you produce it. So thank you so much in that regard. I want to shift to another area that we've kind of touched on a little bit, but I want to talk about getting into climate. We know much of the research, the climate surveys from the University of Michigan, why Black faculty and faculty of color leave, it's anchored in some regards to the climate, to climate issues. And so I want to talk about the climate, and I really want to talk about this concept, working while Black, because it is a concept, it is real. So I'm saying it's working while Black when you're at a predominantly white institution in the academy. So what I'd like for you to talk about is I want you to talk about, relationships. How are you navigating workplace relationships? Like, how is it? Like, where's your community in the workplace? Do you have a community in the workplace? And so I want to talk about climate and how that impacts faculty of color. And I particularly want you to tell me, where is your community and how have you established community, if you have, in the workplace, the place that we spend more time here than with our families in many regards. So talk about workplace climate. And Dr. Ward, I'll begin with you on this question.
Are we slipping back into them last names?
I don't know where I am. I'm just discombobulated.
You're doing great. You're doing great. We give you a hard time because you're doing so great. And
And there's also a question in the box.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your question, Ketra, is about navigating the workplace, about climate and community. So I think climate, well, in fact, a lot of this that we're talking about, in some level, it's broad and encompasses all of us to some extent, but also, further down, there's a wide variation based on our particular location. So which department you're in, what college you're in. So my particular location being in 2 LS&A units, the Residential College and DAS, which is the acronym for the Department of African American and African Studies. The climate as I experience it, the racial climate, is not hostile. That's in part because DAS is unique, I think, throughout the university in the proportion of Black faculty, and because of the subject matter of the unit, what we research and teach. Now, I'm not saying that there are not ways in which problems around race may manifest itself in that department. I'm not saying that may be the case, but what I'm saying is because of who's there and what our subject matter is, I don't have the same type of climate challenges, problems that colleagues here and elsewhere may have. So acknowledge that. The Residential College is a largely white unit, but because of its politics and particularly my place in it, I have not experienced a hostile racial climate. So the climate can vary depending on our location, likewise community. So I think that's important to recognize on its own, the variation. And in terms of my responding to your question, I'll say partly because of my particular location, I think of climate, not just in terms of faculty, but also in terms of students, and to a lesser extent, the broader population and staff. And so I do want to make a call for this in this conversation and the places it takes us beyond this time to think about how Black faculty, our relationship to students and Black students in particular. So Laura referenced the triad of the main areas of faculty responsibilities, right? Scholarship/teaching one, scholarship/research one, teaching another, and then service a third. And part of what I heard, what you're saying, Laura, and what we all know is that service happens in multiple ways. Some of them recognized, some not valued, some seen and not seen. And in that context, we could think about the service, the relationships we have with students. Now, I prefer not to think of it as service. I think that we have an opportunity, we as Black faculty, particularly senior Black faculty, have an opportunity, and we might take it as a responsibility to serve a set of roles for and with Black students. Now, there are complexities there, which I don't want to minimize, but I think we have to recognize that our location relative to students in general and Black students is unique and presents spaces for us to work with and be there for students. And in that regard, I'll close this comment right here by pointing out two things that are present right now on campus, which is the struggle, if you will, over Trotter House or the Trotter Multicultural Center, with which is developed, as I understand it, by a Black graduate student raising the concern by writing a letter, I think addressed to the regents, about Black students feeling marginalized, pushed out of the Trotter Multicultural Center. And then an article written in Michigan Review in response to that, challenging the very notion of Black spaces in ways which use the language and the thinking that are consistent with right-wing conservative thinking in politics outside the university for decades, some of which frankly are aligned with choice theoretic approaches that are part of what Laura spoke to in the teaching of law and economics. But anyway, and so in response, Black students, I think led by the BSU, have mounted an effort to occupy, as they say, Trotter House. So that's been happening the last week or so. Secondly, a Black RA in Markley, I believe, came home to find posters on their door vandalized and believes this to be racially motivated expression of racial hostility. And students and others are mobilizing in response to that. So those are two current moments in which racism, acts of racial problems around race and Black people in particular on campus. And we can say it this way, Black people's place on campus are being experienced and played out through students. And so I'm raising this as something that us think about it and talk about and act about, of how we as Black faculty are there with Black students.
Right, very good, thank you. And you're right, I appreciate the integrated response. And what I want to do, just in the interest of time, I want to get to some of the questions that we have in the chat, because they're really, really interesting. But I want to say, just generally, you know, for those of you in the audience, now we represent, those of us on this panel represent, of course, individual units. But I would venture to say that although there are variations when we talk about, you know, climate and what's happening in each of the respective units, there are some differences, but overall, systemically, there's a prevailing culture in the academy that we know climate is an issue and know there's some things that we have to do better. What I want to do is, I want to read this question. I want one of the panelists to take it. Let me just indulge me as I read it. The person says, as someone who 37 years ago sat in the chairs you occupy now and called out systemic racism in the academy you are now employed by, I am so grateful that I simply live to be able to see all of your scholars as having taken up the mantle of change. What do you have to say to the late stage doctoral students and first year faculty of color who can be lost if we don't reach out to them? This is another way of thinking about community and belonging. How can we help the first year doctoral students who are walking in the paths that you all have blazed? What can we say? So I'll go to, now check this out. Naomi first, check the first name, yeah, and Kristen will be next. Okay.
Thanks. I'll be quick. And I am so glad you took this question. I just have to send a huge hug and shout out to Edie Lewis, who without her, I probably would not still be here at Michigan, because she was modeling incredible behavior of being somebody who, in her incredibly humble and thoughtful and genuine way, saw me as a person and was there for me. I felt safe enough, so I called on her when I needed her. So that's what, Edie, it's so good to know that you're, I don't know if you're in Oaxaca or if you're in Ann Arbor, but it's great to know you're out there. Your vision and your footsteps and presence are so incredibly important. What do I say to first year faculty and late stage doctoral students? If there's somebody around you who can be there, like who you see, reach out to them. And to make that really happen, do what Edie did, and she helped me when I was first beginning. for us to try, we're being pulled in so many directions, but try to show some humanity. And we all have to put on our armor in an element in some ways, but we need to show that, yes, we can be accessible. Yeah, I'll just be quiet with that.
Okay, very good. I'll go to Christian and then Mark.
Well, on the what to say business, what I think is part of the problem with regards to this is existential stuff that people go through in grad school, right? It's like, oh, what am I doing? I think part of the difficulty, though, in resolving that is folks are seeing what exists currently and not what could be. So, I mean, rather than talk about myself, I'll talk about Stephen, right? So it's just like, many people believe that if you're in the academy, you can't also have a connection with movements. Stephen manifests this very clearly with regards to embedding his research and his interest in a particular community, and then showing that's a false dichotomy. So there's many people who believe that if you're committed or you're staying in the academy, then you're not able to do these other things. And it's just like, where'd you get that from? That's not the case. And look at these examples over here. Look at what these people are doing. And so I think it's partly a crisis of imagination, because especially my program, people come in, they hit the methods sections really hard because that's what they're instructed to do. And then with regards to being and purpose and being whole and thriving, they're not taught that. They're taught the method sequence, and then they're not given any strong foundation, in my opinion, in any kind of like political science theory, especially anything off the beat and track. And so they end up not knowing they end up with amazing skills on how to do stuff, but not knowing what's a good question. And so, and then they get caught by seeing what they think people are doing. They don't even know what we do, because of many things that we do, we don't talk about. And so their conception of what the academy is off. And so when they're thinking about whether or not they want to stay, many people are doing that now and all these other things. It's just like, it's a crisis of imagination, because when you actually talk to people who are engaged in prison outreach or social movement activity or revolutionary activity in different countries and so forth, and people are like, oh, wow, I didn't know you could do that. It's just like, yes, that's right. You can do that. It is possible. And I think that opens things up, and that gets people to be incredibly motivated. I mean, I have a student of mine who was, she was running the research division in DCPD. She was getting them to say, hey, what works on reducing police violence? And it's just like, that's not promoted in the department because it's all about tenure track positions. So they're missing out on this whole other thing. But if they looked at the program and where people actually got jobs, we got people doing that. We got people, unfortunately, at CIA. We got people that are doing some movement consulting. We have people that are now with foundations. So if they're actually looking at what people are doing in the world and communicating that to grad students, I think that would be highly motivating to get them to continue to kind of have purpose and meaning and then finish.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that response. Mark, you want to add?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to be a little bit controversial. So I'm in computer science, and that is a field that you won't see a lot of Black scientists, right? Black folks, you won't see a lot of them in here. So when you're in these spaces and you need a cohort, you need to reach beyond the institution. That's number one. And I want to bring up a topic. My advisor said to me, and you guys probably have advisors, different family members, you have to work twice as hard for half the recognition, right? And you're going into a space that's going to be hard. At one point I wanted to do fairness in AI, right? To make sure that artificial intelligence is feared for everyone, regardless of their skin, et cetera, or their background. Not on one occasion, on many occasions, I was told, hell no, do not touch that. That will bring down the level of your research and let you, and you will be disrespected. And honestly, there's some truth to that. So, and I find myself, and I've had discussions with faculty members also, that sometimes we're harder on our Black students, right? Because we know what ahead of them, right? We know that they will be challenged for no reason at all, right? We know that they will have that sense that they don't belong where they are, even though they do, right? But I'm wondering if that approach works, right? Because maybe we need new ways, right, to foster the next generation of scholars, right, and people in the academy, to have them step in and belong, not feel like they belong, but belong. So I will just leave it there, because I'm just asking, has anybody else beside me ever heard of that work twice as hard for half the recognition, or was it just me?
Absolutely.
I think that's the narrative of all of our stories.
Okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, we have a few more questions that I'd like to get to. The next one, it asks, can you talk about allyship that has been useful to you, if you've had any, as you establish your success? What should white faculty know about what successful anti-racism in this professional environment has been for you? So this question is about allyship and the role that white faculty can play in this regard. Could I see a hand of someone that would like to, Mark? Yes.
Yeah, I'll take this one. Okay, so remember I just said that you have systems that are baked in, right? The disparities are baked in. And let me move over to another domain. In computer science, there's really female students, right? And I am not a misogynist. But what I found was that I taught computer science the way computer science was taught to me, because it was easy. And because I did that, it was harder for female students to have a fair share. And this persists throughout the engineering, right? So what I'm saying to allies is just look, because I'm just saying this experience has allowed me to reconsider how I make my research and my my teaching inclusive to those female students are marginalized in my field. So I had to disrupt that. So what I'm asking of allies is to kind of frame it in this manner, right? You have to understand that the way you were taught, the way you experience the academy is different for these people of color coming in. So it's just a reflection. It didn't take me a long time to see a lot of differences in what I was doing to make that change. So I'd leave it there.
Yeah, well, listen, I appreciate that, because, I think one of the things to take away from that is understanding the positionality that allies bring to the process. They see the world through a different lens. So acknowledging that positionality is important. And also having allies that help to share the message without co-opting the message, without making the message about them. I think that's the other part. We have another question that it says,
Laura had her hand up.
yeah, I'm sorry. There's another hand.
Yeah,
Laura, are you there? Oh, there you are. I'm sorry. I see now. Laura, and then we'll go to Christian. Then I'll go to the next question. I have the screen up, so I couldn't see your hands. Yes, Laura, and then Christian.
No, I'll keep it short because you have other questions. But yeah, allyship is a tough question because, a lot of times what will happen is people will email you privately and tell you, oh, I really support you, blah, 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 or text you privately, but they'll keep it private. But what you really need is people to actually take on the risk too, because if they're keeping their allyship private, then it's probably not really an allyship. They're trying to maybe kind of comfort their own guilty conscience, and at the same time maintain their position in the status quo. They're not willing to go to bat publicly. And that, I think, is the most important aspect of allyship, is that people, so-called allies, are willing to bear some of the costs that it requires to effect change, institutional and societal change. Because I can say anything privately, talk is cheap, right? But what do I do? How do I effect that change publicly? What hits, what blows am I willing to take in order to effectuate my commitment and my allyship? And so I think that's really important, because allyship is not just a sticker or like a bumper sticker or a t-shirt. It's much deeper than that. We're sitting here because people actually sacrificed much more than just talking, right? People lost their lives. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I appreciate you talking about the courage and the visibility that allies need to have, not just in private, but when the stakes are high, not just when it's safe behind closed doors or in an email. That visibility is really important. Christian, you want to add?
Yes. I actually think allyship is hard. Initially, when you started to talk, I was kind of like, I reverted to the Malcolm comment in the Malcolm X movies, like, get out of my way, But then the other part is kind of like, but you need allies, you not only need mentors, you need sponsors, and so I think both are necessary. But in political science, I think predominantly most Black folks study symbolic representation. It's like, you vote for people who look like you. Now, if we can step away from that and be like, well, most people study things that are kind of similar in a sense. They study themselves. Most people study themselves. Okay, so acknowledging that, then this becomes problematic as people are trying to evaluate your case because they're not familiar with your case. They don't know the nuances of it. They don't know its value. And in all likelihood, most Black people are not on the journals. And so they're not going to evaluate the case. They're not going to know who to send your comments to in terms of reviewers. And they're going to be like, that's not my case. And that case doesn't matter that much. And so the allyship either comes to, you either need to use my case and learn it, which is hard, or have no preference whatsoever on any case material at all. And then it becomes a methodological discussion. It's like, is this done well? Acknowledging I don't know anything about your case, is the methodology done well? So allyship is hard because most people don't want to do that. They wish to go, this letter comes from this institution, so that alleviates me from having to read anything. No one wants to learn more stuff. And so if everyone's staying in their lane, then this makes allyship incredibly difficult to do as letters and the process of mentoring. And, oh, okay, can that young African-American scholar find someone out in the world who's going to be able to write a letter for them that this department will care about? Good luck if they don't think much of your topic because it's not their case. And so unless you navigate those nuances, then allyship's not going to work at all because you're going to be like, well, we evaluated them properly. You evaluated them properly in a process that is systematically biased against this particular case because it's not your case. And since no one wants to do any extra work, I want to understand my case and do my evaluation and learn yours. No one's going to do that. So then that just means that systematically they're just going to get screwed. And the one thing we jumped around a little bit, but one thing I wanted to mention, which was kind of interesting, was political science had the largest number of faculty of color of any political science department in the United States of America, except for a historical Black college. It's gone. And when we had it, no one talked about it. We were in part afraid to talk about it because in the context that it was in, we would have put a target on our backs and everybody would have been receiving hate mail and who knows what would have happened. But I got a picture of all these people of color that we had in the department. For whatever reason, that then systematically starts to get chipped away. We just lost a couple. And so it's like, I was like, wow, how did that happen? How did it, I mean, I'll go constellation of president, dean, chair, opportunistic hustle. But it came together and fell apart. And the story of how it came together, the reason for mentioning it, the story of how it came together and its importance for, okay, how did allies help this happen? Because it's historically unprecedented. How did allies work to make that happen? It's a case study that needs to be kind of evaluated. I was in it, saw it happen, and I'm like, how did we get here? Oh, damn, they're Black. And I'm like, and they got one of my former students who was at Stanford with her partner who was a Latino who just, bam, they just brought it in. And you're just kind of sitting there going, okay, with him added, we now have 4 Latinos. And the thing that was so amazing for me was predominantly faculty of color in political science. They study American politics. The majority of this group is outside of American politics, which is also historically unprecedented. So it's just a bizarreness placed upon bizarreness that helps us not understand this as a pattern, but you're kind of like, okay, if we need to break out of this box in order to make things happen and help allies kind of be like, oh, it's not the same typical type of thing that we're going to see from these Black folks. So thus, it's like, oh, it never occurred to me that you had contention in Mexico. Wow, that's fantastic. Let's bring them in. Oh, I didn't realize that this person was able to work on this topic in this African nation. Oh, this is fantastic. It's not symbolic representation. It's not the same kind of trite thing. And that makes things easier for allies, is my point, in the sense that they're not coming to this thing as seeing something in a box. There's no box for them to, everything's outside of the box. So they're just kind of like, oh, now we can see methodology. Oh, okay, now we're not seeing letters from the same 3 people that we don't necessarily respect. It's just fascinating how that kind of emerged.
So thank you for all of you in providing different slices of and different perspectives of how the role that allies have to play in this regard. We have another question. It says, it's a great discussion and sadly, so many familiar stories. Love to hear from the panelists their experience of likely helpful / facilitative anti-racist individuals in academia who buck the norm, admittedly perhaps few and far in between, but whose role is key to moving the needle on racial discrimination. It seems these individuals need to be co-opted in discussions like here to find ways to chip away at the structural barriers. I want to actually ask, Stephen, if you're comfortable, just kind of getting your voice in this as well, what are your thoughts about this question?
My thoughts on this question are not all that clear. I'm not sure if I fully get what the question is asking, but I'll tell you what's on my mind from this question and from what Christian just shared. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking back to the 1970s. And Christian's Department of Political Science, had a group called the Black Matters Committee. And so Christian, I'm not sure what time period you're referring to when U of M Poli-Sci had the largest number of Black faculty other than HBCUs. You're talking about more recently, right? A couple years ago? Go ahead and just say it. Unmute yourself and say it. We're around the table, remember?
The last 2 years.
Okay. Oh, so now recent. Okay. So
recently.
I think you're calling for some investigation of how that was and what brought that about. I'm thinking of a previous era, and I wonder if I don't think there's any connection, but this group, the Black Matters Committee, was recruiting Black graduate students to poli-sci. They brought Cedric Robinson here, who taught here for 2 years, who later would be the author of Black Marxism, among other works. Archie Singham was an important part of that. And a little later, Evans Young recently passed away, who was in the dean's office, and before that in Cass. Evans Young was, so Evans as a non-Black person of color might be seen in this frame of ally. Evans was in the dean's office when I arrived on the faculty here in 2002, and was instrumental in facilitating my smooth transition to teaching at U of M, and actually served, in retrospect, I was able to see more clearly, served as a model of a principled way of being and acting in the institution. So those are some of the connected things that are on my mind about this question around allyship and around anti-racist positioning. So again, I would see Evans as someone who was positioned within the institution, first in poli-sci, then in Cass, before it was DAS, and in the dean's office, as in his person and in the things he carried forth, programs and so forth, as anti-racist work in the institution.
Right. And thank you for that. And I know there are many others, people who are in the anti-racism fight, but we won't have time to go through all that here. The last question we have, I want to direct this to Naomi, because this is a person who says she's a senior female full professor, 20 years at UM. So you got a few years on her, Naomi. So you are directly the person that can address this particular question. So let me read it for you in its entirety. I'm a senior female full professor, 20 years at the UM, the only African descendant in my department. I have experienced the gamut of racism here, including being mistaken for the custodian. My scholarship is minimized by my colleagues, and there are no graduate students of color. I have rewarding relationships and I mentor outside of my department, but I'm feeling the conundrum of being the person always pushing for DEI initiatives in my department, always being the one to try to start the conversation. But now I'm at the point is, should I give up this fight, meaning leave for a better environment, let them win? Toni Morrison made the point that this is not a Black people's work. How would the panel, and I'm asking Naomi in particular, how would you deal with this responsibility of representation? Is the onus still on people like me to make racists do better? Naomi, what are your thoughts? And then Mark, you can chime in.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this question to Teresa Satterfeld, who asked the question. And I want to say thank you for already doing so much work, for being here for 20 years, and the fact you have not let anyone win. The fact that you have hung on is a wonderful thing. I also want to say you need to take care of yourself. You know what they say on the airplane, put on your own mask. You've been putting on the masks of everyone else to help them. So now it's time for you to take care of yourself. And if this means going to another institution that loves you or is saying they're interested in you, look them over carefully, but go. You don't owe anyone anything. Unfortunately, it's people who love you. The institution, it's not their job to love you. So put yourself first. I also want to say that when I was in graduate school, the only other Black person I saw in the department, like anyone, students, whatever, was the custodian. This was in the early 90s, so we didn't have the internet so much. So I was at the library and I would see her. The library closed at 9. So it was really nice to see Marie, who was there. And it was like, oh. So I hear what you mean, like when there's so few people. And I've also been, confused for the one or, other Black woman in a music society when we look nothing alike, but, oh, it's the brown one. So I feel you, these things make a whole lot of sense, but I want to just, from one senior person to another who's been here a while, you have done so much. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And take care of yourself and get whatever the best thing is for you. Yeah. I think that's where I'll leave it, although, because I don't want to go on with too much time, but this is Black people, the whole Toni Morrison thing. We're going to do this work no matter what. This is the thing. Even if we say nothing, our very presence is an activist stance in our departments. So if, let other people step up. Yes, other people should be stepping up, and other non-Black people should be stepping up.
Very good. Thank you. I'll go to Laura and then Christian.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to reiterate what Naomi Andre said to Teresa. I'm also one of the only ones right now. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm the second tenured Black woman in the University of Michigan Law School, and It hasn't, it's been almost 19 years. So I'm not quite as senior as the two of you, but it's been long and it's been difficult. And I would reiterate what Naomi says, is that if you don't have to sacrifice yourself on the altar of martyrdom, because if you have been in the institution for a very long time and you have failed to, or sorry, not failure is not the right word. Other people have not joined your mission, then I think that you owe it to yourself and probably also your community to move on to other places where you can affect that change socially. And I'll just conclude with saying that I am in the process of, well, this is difficult, but I am in the process of litigation, and I have been demoted 5 year. I've just experienced a 5-year demotion in my unit. And so being here is a privilege and an honor, and something that I do not actually take lightly. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing. And listen, like family, because we're at the table and we're at first name. We're on first name basis now. Listen, we're with you. And we're with you in spirit and whatever way. I just want to say thank you for sharing, and we're with you. And I also, and I'll go to you, Christian, but just another thing that I used to have on my door from a female perspective, being in this industry. And one of the comments earlier was saying, when you were talking about racism in general, the comment was, and for women, it's 3 times, you got to work 3 times harder. And there was this thing I used to have on my door, I hope I get it right. It says, women, to be successful in the workplace, have to work like a dog, act like a man, and look like a lady. All of those things, and then do good work. So we're talking about racism, but I don't want to let the intersectionality of gender and sexuality and all in class and all those things get lost. But again, those are the hurdles, those are the struggles. But listen, you know, I think it was Andrea Lord, I may not get it right, or Andrea Lawton. Nonetheless, the person was saying, you know, Black women are like trees, like no one teaches them how to be strong, but the nature of their lives are such that they learn how to get rooted and to withstand the winds and the challenges. And that's a part of what they need for survival. And so I want to echo what the other women on the panel said, you know, be strong, self-care, but know that, you know, I believe that what's inside of us are small things compared to what's outside of us. So, you know, drawing on those things that make us who we are, uniquely who we are at the intersection of race, gender, and class, let's not diminish the power that we have, that our ancestors have modeled for centuries. But I just want the sisters to know we're with you, we understand that. And although we're talking about anti-racism, we're very mindful of the way in which gender intersects in very unique ways to impact the experiences of Black women and other women of color. Christian, and then I'll go to Mark, and then we're gonna have to wind it down, unfortunately, as we only have 10 minutes left. So I have one parting question for you all so we can end. But before we do that, Christian, and then Mark, and then I'll try to wrap it up.
Funny, y'all have me hearing Chaka Khan's "I'm Every Woman" in my mind right now. So this is my 30th year doing this, job number 5, and so it's always a fight, right? But whether or not you're ready to take that fight. So you know, pre-tenure, you're not ready to take it. Post-tenure, you could take it, but you're not always in the mood to take it. I'm in a space right now where it's just like, I'm not in the mood for fighting. I'm not in the mood for service. I'm in the mood for cranking. I'm just like, I'm working on 8 books. I'm trying to hit some historically unprecedented stuff. I'm saying no to everything. Unless somebody's making me a chair of a committee, which no one wants to do. No one wants to let me be a chair of anything, because that's a smart move. I'm surprised you'll let me be on this thing, because I'm just saying no to everything, and I'm just like cranking. And you rarely see Black folk who have the opportunity. This is like Chris Rock talking about what he did after Pootie Tang. It failed, but he still got another opportunity. How many times do you have an opportunity to just crank and just do your work. Not have to chase money, not have to ask anybody's permission, just execute. So now in that space, I'm not up for fighting. But you know, we have the other years of fighting. But to the sister that made the comment, I'm just like, it's called the market. There's an institution out there potentially, you can see, there's an institution out there potentially that alleviates some of that fight that you have to take, that alleviates some of that loneliness. I call it, I came up with a word, Negro Solo. I had a book of African-American Afrolisms, I called it back in the day. It was like indescribable words for the indescribable parts of African-American life. And much of it was situated in academia, but basically that. So Negro Solo can be countered by the market, sister. I'll tell you in job number 5.
I love it. I absolutely love it. You know, you're making me think, I think maybe what we should do after this is compile resources that we can share with our listeners. Some of the things that you all have mentioned, you know, if you have books, I think it's a great way for us to help promote it, what you're doing. So I'd like for the panelists later, we'll talk about this, but let's share these valuable resources with our audience, with our listening audience, as a way of helping them, and also as a way of supporting you, you know, your endeavors as well. So don't let me forget that. Mark, you got the last one, and then we're gonna give you one question. Everyone's gonna give me a 30-second popcorn answer, and we're gonna call it a day. So Mark, let me hear your comments.
Yeah. So well, my response would be in terms of a question, right? Close to what Christian was going down the line. So we all had struggles, right? Because the system wasn't changed before us. So who changes the system? Would you put that on pre-tenured faculty? No, you shouldn't, because if you do that, we won't have a critical mass. Post-tenure, associate level, a little bit full. I think it's necessarily some part of our duty to pay back to the community, right? For me, I did no DEI work before tenure, but after that, I saw that there was a need. And I mean, don't let it take up all your time, but this is how progress is made, right? The sacrifices. So I may view it a little bit differently, right? I'm at the associate level right now, so I'm at jeopardy. But if I was a full professor, I'd go for it, right? Just to make it, it's a community, right? It's the diaspora. It's that there's the African saying that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. It's called Ubuntu. That. So we need to get back to that. We and form that kind of a structure within the academy. That's my thinking.
And that's a great one to end on, is community, the sense of community. And the Black community, you know, we've long realized that it takes a village, although we know it was popularized when Hillary Clinton was running for president, but we know it takes a village, and community is everything. And so that is what we have to continue to do. Now, as we wind down, we have 5 minutes. So we're gonna get through this. This is what I'd like for you to do. We have one last question, and I want you to spend like 30 seconds. I just need the really quick version of this. Mark has indicated to us in several instances that the academy wasn't built for us. It wasn't built for people who look like us, right? And so I'm sure, I know for me, some days it feels like I'm holding on with duct tape and a prayer. I'm holding on with duct tape and a prayer. What I want you to tell me is tell the audience, what is your duct tape? Because we know it's hard. We've talked about racism. We've talked about all the ways that it impacts the success of faculty of color, but you made it. You are successful. You are the embodiment of Blackness thriving in the academy. So what would you say in 30 seconds is your duct tape that has helped you to hold on and keep moving and survive, and not only that, thrive in the academy as a Black faculty? I want to begin with you, Naomi. Tell us your duct tape.
All right, this is going to be a little strange and I'll make it really quick. My duct tape, I've got three things come to mind. One, very importantly, and it's not always the same person, but a couple of friends, both senior and junior, both here at Michigan and away. So that community. A second bit of duct tape, having really good music. This is, you know, as a music person, and it comes from all sorts of ways. I'm a big Jesse Norman fan. I also, I'm a big Tracy Chapman fan. And the third thing, kind of crazy, my scented candles. I love having my candles, using a flame as sort of a focus point for writing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I love it. I love it. I love it. Next, Laura, tell me, what's your duct tape?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I don't walk alone here. I have ancestors and people. So that's my duct tape.
There you go. Very good.
My ancestors. So thank you.
Yes. And listen, being reminded that we move in the power of a mighty past. Absolutely right. Stephen, what's your duct tape?
Black scholars and their work that came before. And I'm talking about scholars in and outside the academy. And saying that, I want to remind us that we're all, which is hovering over all this conversation, is that our scholarship, meaning our contemporary Black scholars and those who came before us, have reshaped, challenged, and pushed forward our various disciplines and fields.
Yeah,
secondly, various people in my life and movements from the past and current movements have also been my duct tape as inspiration, place to be connected to, community, so forth. And music as well. A range of people and genres, but I'll tell you, since Christian mentioned Shaka Khan's song earlier, the song that came to mind earlier was Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive. A little disco era for us.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Speaking of Christian, what's your duct tape?
I might come up with three. One is I got into this because of social movements and a desire to move with folks. And so retaining those connections has always, I don't take the academy in the same kind of isolated light. My life is not based principally in here. It's based largely in these movements. Second is obfuscation. I've moved beyond subfields, beyond fields, beyond disciplines. Except for Michigan, I've usually been tenured in 2 or 3 different departments. Here, I just have this courtesy crap and then affiliated with a bunch of different people, but people can't necessarily find a box to put me in. And 4 out of the 5 institutions that I'm in, I always had a workshop. I brought together like-minded individuals to talk about unpublished work, and followed a format that was created by Charles Tilley. But that has always been a life-sustaining kind of environment.
Very good. Thank you. And last but not least, Mark, what's your duct tape?
It's I've been fortunate enough to have a good allies, and I don't know if anybody else has done this, but I have a fight song. It's a South African fight song. The higher you build your barriers, the higher I will climb, right? And I always remember that, and I keep it in here.
Very good.
Oh, there's a lot of barriers.
Thank you so very much. And you know, music.
Ketra, if I may, Naomi has put something in the chat that I think you should see.
Wait, in the chat. Wait, let's see.
Tell her, Naomi.
Oh yeah, I was about to tell you. I'm about to tell you what my duct tape is. My duct tape is music. I love music. Music gives flight to the mind, wings to the imagination, gaiety to all of life. So I love jazz, I love reggae, and I'm a proud Tupelo, Mississippi native. So I love the blues, the good old Southern blues. But let me tell you, the other element of the other strip of my duct tape is connecting with people like you. You inspire me, what you do, how you do it. Your presence matters. And this is what allows me, is connecting and meeting people like you and sharing our stories and sitting around this proverbial virtual kitchen table to talk about race and Blackness and how we've overcome and what we need to do better. This is the duct tape that keeps me going, is the inspired connections that I have with people like you. So thank you all so much for our conversation. I celebrate you, all of you. Continue doing what you're doing. Thanks to those of you in the listening audience. I hope we've given you some insight. I hope we've inspired you. We've been real about the challenges. We've named racism, but we've made it, and we've tried to share with you things you can do. So thank you so much for listening. Peace and blessings to all of you. And I'm going to pass it over to Deirdre to close us out.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much. I wanted to thank, on behalf of all of you, the Senate Assembly, the Faculty Senate Office, staffing women, the Faculty Senate Office, Elizabeth Devlin, Mary Jo Banasic. We're not going to be here with us much longer, but they have worked wonderfully. They have supported me. Alan Liu, all of the SACUA members, I appreciate your support. I wanted to tell you, CAR is our acronym, Committee on Anti-Racism. CAR, like driving the car, got the keys to the car. And at our website through the Faculty Senate Office, and you can find it on Google too, we have a website where we want to hear from you. If there's something that's come up that you ain't feeling real good about, and you want to bounce it off some people, we are happy to listen. And we've got some people, and it's confidential. We're not like, FAFSCO or anything, but there are certainly people who can listen, maybe help you think about something, and then also can make recommendations for some of the other university places you might go. But sometimes you just need a little someplace, you're not sure who to talk to, and you don't want everybody to know, but just one more option for you. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, panel. This has just been wonderful. And I thank you, and thank you. Thank you all. And we hope to hear from you in the website.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Say hello. Thank you.
Keturah, you are amazing, fan.
It's easy. With a group like this, are you kidding me? You make it easy. You make it easy.
I'm so humbled to be around this crowd.
Thank you. That's why you're my duct tape. That's why.
Oh, you didn't ask me my duct tape.
Oh, what is your duct tape, Deirdre?
Oh shoot, well, it used to be, it's music. I have discovered some non-alcoholic wine that I can drink while I work. But Isley Brothers Fight the Power, that was one.
Okay.
And lately I've been listening to James Cleveland, Reverend James Cleveland. Sometimes we need a little anointing on there. But yeah, but anyway, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye.